of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, then we will move on to public comments.
Hey, I missed you guys. I'm Bobby Ann Dostey from Brown Road, and I missed you. So I'm really excited. I saw the other day somebody posted kind of last minute that you guys had a bunch of schools here for the 8th grade. I know you can't answer now, but a lot of people are wondering why it wasn't the 3 years coming up and it was just 8th grade, like why were only 8th grade invited? That was one question. Another thing that I am really excited about is the turkey trot coming up. So I know the PTO is helping out with that, and we made this exciting flyer. But on Sunday, November 19th, we're doing the turkey trot for the 6th graders field trip. And you might have already seen it in the bridge, but hopefully you can spread the word and hopefully your families will join us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Greg Whitmore, North Road. So the other day, the school board put out a reminder for the 8th grade info night. And at the bottom, it said that they are anticipating some level of choice between Co-Brown, Concord High School, and Pembroke Academy. And it's that sentence, the some level, that gets me. Because we didn't vote in March for some level of choice, and we didn't vote for lotteries. So I don't know where those come from. In the slideshow that you showed us in regards to high school choice, you put forth 2 options, one of which was restrictive, included lotteries, and it had a 70% stipulation. You know this is not a viable option. The town doesn't want this. We know lotteries are disasters. They're historical disasters in Deerfield, and it's caused generational issues. The other option presented was just unrestricted choice between the 3 schools. And we know that's the winner, right? So most of the people in town, maybe around 60% if we look at the surveys, are likely going to choose Co-Brown, and the rest are going to be split between Concord High School and PA, and that's fantastic. And the family should just straight up have the choice and the option to do that. So I know that Deerfield families are counting on you to do the right thing when the vote comes up, hopefully in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to do the agenda review, which is, the agenda is quite short, though I think the night will be a little bit long. So we are starting with the fiscal year 25 budget listed these lines. Barrett Christina from the New Hampshire School Board Association is coming to do a workshop with us. And then we have some invoices, and then there will be a non-public session. Is there anything else?
Can we just add small letter C to the
Yes.
non-public?
Anyone have anything else to add to the agenda? Okey-dokey. So we will start with our budget for the year.
So this is the new format, straight from the accounting system. I told you it would look a little bit different this year, and so far, the places that we've worked with this, it has been well received. I think it's easy to read. It's just takes a little bit of getting used to because it looks different. Amber was thrilled to figure out a way. She didn't think she could get your default budget on this report, and she was able to do that. So that's great for the towns that have a default budget. We're going to stick to the process that we've used for the past couple of years, where we got Mrs. Withy's numbers, not Mrs. Withy only, but the school's numbers in there a little bit early so that we could at least start going over those. And then Amber's still working on completing the rest of it, getting we're just starting to get invoices in, so we're trying to get to the most accurate information we can. And she'll be here at your next meeting to present the remainder of the budget. So to try to follow along, there's a lot of columns. You're just gonna look at the 24-25 proposed budget column, and we're gonna skip all the lines that have a zero. So we'll just be talking at the lines that are populated with a dollar figure. The other thing that can be a little bit confusing is the way the notes print out. They print out further down. So the first note, you can see it's very long on the first page, the account notes, subscriptions, etc. That goes to the line above it, the electronic software licensing. That's the way the notes print. So it's printed closer to high school tuition, but it actually goes to the line above it. So that's really the only thing just to keep in mind. Other than that, I think it's pretty visually pleasing.
I just have a question.
Sure.
About the format generally. Okay, so it says 2023-24 voted budget. That was the default budget, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was your default that was voted in.
Okay. And then we don't yet have the proposed default budget.
Correct.
Sorry about that.
Correct.
Okay. Cool.
Ready?
Ready.
Ready?
Zach, do you want a ruler?
No, I'm good,
Well, don't say I never offered you.
but I love that you brought a bunch of rulers.
I like to use a ruler. All right.
So our first line is 1100-111, and that's the intern stipends. We've kept well, it's been a default budget, so it falls back to the 7,800. We did reduce the line to 2,000. We have not unfortunately had UNH interns for, we've had a few, I should take it back. We've had a PE intern, we've had some speech and language pathologists who have interned. We have some nurse interns that aren't from UNH, but we have not had classroom interns in a couple of years. So the program is placing students closer to the UNH campus area, Dover, Rochester, in that area. So we have not had, so we reduced that line. And I've not been contacted to say, hey, you've got a bundle coming your way next year. So so that line has been reduced. Our substitute salaries, we usually put in 50,000. From one year to the next, you just never know. I know that the cost for the increase, if you sub it for a day, it's $100, and then if it's a long-term sub, it's $200 a day, if we can find a long-term sub. So we usually average about $45,000. So, and then the next line is not, the next few lines are not mine. The next line down is 1100-430, which is instructional equipment. That got bumped up a little bit.
I think it's a repair line. The whole line doesn't print. Amber was gonna look into that, but I think that's a repair at the end.
The equipment repair.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's instruction equipment repair is what it should be.
I noticed that on, I was looking at last year's budget, and that's how I noticed that word was missing. So she's gonna try to see if she can wrap the lines to get the full title.
And that's typically in the music line. We keep that line going for instruction equipment repair. Yeah, that's the line for equipment repair, Patty. For music equipment repairs, as well as other school needs or for equipment repairs, and we have not, we just continue to have repairs to be made with our musical equipment. So we'll bump that up to about $1,800. Technology equipment. I know that most of these are on the appendix as well, which you have attached. Electronic software, that's the line that that we've combined in the past. We had technology, we put some of our lines that we use for library in that line as well. And in the appendix, that line covers many subscriptions which have gone up. Brain Pop is something that we're probably going to be canceling, but replacing it with Discovery Education and Nearpod. So it's an even switch. It includes needs of PE and library online subscriptions like Learning A to Z, Map, which is a science software, IXL, we get that for social studies and science, Super Teacher, Titastic, Video, Seesaw, all of those educational technology subscriptions that we have for teachers and students in the school.
If anyone has questions at any point, you can ask them.
So this is just basically more because you're moving funds from somewhere that it was in a different.
We did this last year, yeah. So further down in the budget, you'll see there's a library line that usually had money in it that got dollared out. So all that got moved into.
And then Appendix C in the further back has the list of everything that's in that
Of all the
line. So
different
there are
software
a
and
few
stuff.
lines that have appendices, which just so that it just gives you more description of what's found in those lines. And we know a half an hour tonight is gonna be tight because Barrett starts at 6:30. So we're gonna go through and then please make sure you have plenty of questions for next time if we don't get to them tonight. So we can answer them.
General supply line is up to 38. As you know, supplies have been increased. Just asked Trish LaFond about paper and she gets all excited about a good sale. World culture, that was the world language line. We switched that line over to world cultures and just carried that budget line, that budget amount over. But he does have specific things that Mr. McCabe, who is our world cultures teacher, has some things that he'd like to purchase. Health is health and wellness. These are, most of these lines have stayed about the same with minimal increases based on the increase in prices of things. Math, you'll see a pretty big jump. We've been in the default budget for a couple of years. We were very fortunate to purchase the Big Ideas last year with our surplus. At this point, our math curriculum for our K-5 has stayed Eureka, but there is another iteration of it, and it's called Eureka Squared. So this $20,000 would be budgeted so that we can get our K-5 teachers all of the materials that they would need for Eureka Squared. We've done a lot of the work in terms of preparing for it. And now it's just a matter of finishing up and getting them the subscriptions that they need to be able to roll out Eureka Squared. It's very, I can have our math folks fill you in on the program, but a lot of schools have switched over to Eureka Squared that have been Eureka schools. I don't know about the SAU, but I know within this out in the state of New Hampshire they have.
So just for the math line, I know the actual is higher than what you're requesting in the budget. Do you think that the budget is high enough to cover what you need?
Yeah, that actual cover Big Ideas, the purchase of Big Ideas. Yeah, that's a great question. And I have the math broken out. So Eureka Squared for kindergarten, it would cost about $170 for the set that you need for Eureka Math Squared. We'll need 6, so it's about $900 for a single year cost. And then that will not be a cost that we incur next year. I do have a budget for 2 different budgets. So this one would include K-5, but I also have another budget prepared if to bring in Eureka Squared for a couple of pivotal grade levels if we need to cut somewhere. And then Big Ideas, there are some costs with Big Ideas just to pay for the digital license, which we knew would happen. So basically you pay $22 per student for the digital license. So based on the numbers of students that we have, it ranges anywhere from $400 to $800 depending on the class that we're getting. Music line has increased just a little bit. All the things that they purchase. Our PE line, same thing. Our PE line has stayed, as you know, all the lines have stayed the same for several years because of default. And so when they priced out the materials that they, or the supplies and resources that they would need. They itemized everything and came to about $2,700.
That's a good point, and I just want to make sure that, and for anyone who hasn't gone through the budget process, we do zero-based budgeting. So whatever numbers are in here, we start from scratch every year. We don't just ask for the same amount year after year.
Mhm.
We do zero-based, so.
Language arts. This line, I'll just get to my language arts. We've been hovering around 14,000. The ELA, the reading specialists, have worked on figuring out what we need for vocabulary books for our students. That goes from grades 5 through 8, as well as for our 4th grade. We have some foundation replacement materials that we always purchase, as well as an online hub called Fun Hub, which is all about foundations and teachers, they get student resources there. We're looking to get some decodable readers for a certain grade. Mrs. Davis and our K-3 team has done a lot of work with letters training and the science of reading, and so they've tried to incorporate some more decodables into their programming. And the decodable reading sets are upwards of $7,800. So they're not cheap. I purchased a set through ESSER grant money this year, and Mrs. Davis purchased a set for last year's budget to see if they were good. They were good materials, and she was really thrilled with the quality of the decodables. So $7,800 would cover 3 classrooms, and she's hoping to purchase something out of this year's budget for our kindergarten. So that's where that increase comes from. Our science line, for those who are new to the budget this year, our science line somehow got zeroed out 2 years ago. And so this past school year, we got the dollar back in. When you have a zero line, it eventually could go away. So all of our science things that we purchased last year had to come out of another line, a supply line or something like that. Every year I have I've tried to get more money in the science line to give our middle school classrooms a certain amount of money. I have budgeted $500 for our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science classrooms, and then an additional $100 for our K-5 teachers to purchase anything that they need for science. So that total comes out to $3,460. That's where that comes from. Social studies, as you know, this is something that we are, we have a new curriculum. We've done a lot of work this year aligning our units with teachers. We have some responsibilities with some new things coming along, like Holocaust and teaching civics. So we are looking for about $2,000 for some new curriculum needs, which would also include Scholastic News and Time for Kids, which a lot of our teachers use, our classrooms use. And then I'm looking for $100 for each middle school classroom and $100 for each K-5 classroom. So that comes out to $4,860. That's where that number comes from. Technology supply line has been something that we've tried to get in the budget as well, but with a default, it falls back to $1. They spend probably at least $1,500, if not more, on things like 3D filament and ink and paper that they need, mice and headphones, and at this point that comes out of our general supplies line, or if we can fit it into another line, we do. But that is the hope, is that we can give them their own personal general supply line so that they can purchase anything they need for technology out of that. Computer repair parts. You all know that is a line that frequently is used. You can see in the actual budget, the $4,677, that $8,000 was not used because I had put money into the ESSER grant to help support, because we had so much more technology in the building. So I had taken about $4,000 in an ESSER grant and dedicated that to computer repair parts. So our tech folks were able to utilize that instead of the budget, so, but that money is no longer going to be available for them to use. It was in our ESSER two, September 30th of this year was the last of the ESSER two money. So we're looking to, that budget line about $10,000. School-wide tech subs. What's that pattern? That's not a typical line. I'm looking at
The C appendix.
No, that's, oh,
650.
that's what it was called. I think it printed out with a different.
Okay, it looks like the curriculum stipend line maybe.
I don't know, I'll have to look. It might have been labeled something different years ago and it carried through the. I'll circle
Gotcha.
it.
See appendix.
Yeah, we don't know what the line is. It's
I'm trying
definitely
to
not
think in my
tech
head,
subs.
what could that be?
It's not your supplies, is it? Do you remember, Trish?
Subscriptions?
1,100, 650?
What do we, oh, I have it here. It's
Oh, you do?
school-wide technology subscriptions.
That's, yeah.
So
Oh,
that's
subs.
subscription is what it is.
Eureka, Windows, Zern,
There you
Tumblr.
go. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh, for getting back. Such a job, you know.
You do it all the time.
Either.
It happens at home too.
All right, so then down to 11,731, new instructional equipment is at $1. We don't really have anything in the past. We purchased like band risers or, something like that or some new library material, fixtures, or things that we need in the library. We don't have anything that is on our radar quite for next year. And a lot of the equipment and fixtures that we buy are actually replacements, so we did ask for a little bit more money down in the replacement line. And then same with new furniture for computer and new furniture networking. Instructional equipment replacement. That's a line that we have had that line in the past for JARS, the JAR systems, which are these systems over here that hold the Chromebooks. Almost every classroom now has them, modulars have them, our 5 through 8 classrooms have them, I think our 4th grade classrooms have them. So that's not necessary, we don't need that, but we are going to start looking at replacement of the touch screens in the classrooms. All of the classrooms are brand new, but there are a few that were original, like the one in the tech lab is an original, was the first one we recently got. And at this point, it's probably 4 years old or so. So the thought is that we would replace that one with maybe a bigger screen, a bigger touch screen. This is furniture fixture replacement. This is Brian's favorite line. At the beginning of the year, end of the summer, beginning of the year, he always puts a big message out like, who needs replacement furniture? What do you need? And this is the line that teachers can get, their flexible seating options, we need rolling chairs, rolling desk chairs for teachers. This line is always spent to the absolute dollar amount. And then 11,738, I believe that's probably in the appendix, but this is for next year, we're looking at end of life for our desktop computers in the entire school. So just in here alone, there's 4, 5, 6, because we have Mrs. Moshu has one, we have a circulation one, we've got these 3. So I think John went around and figured out that there's probably less than a dozen that can handle Windows 11. So the upgrade to Windows 11, the current desktops will not be able to handle the upgrade of Windows 11 in 2025, which is what the direction that we have to go. So We are planning for that, for a full replacement of many of our desktops, as well as ThinkPads, which are the laptops that we got for teachers with grant money a couple years ago. And those will start to need to start replacing those 5 or 6 or 7 at a time. So we're just planning ahead for those end of life replacements, as well as Chromebooks. The current plan right now is that 5th grade will get a new Chromebook, which will carry them through hopefully 8th grade. And then at the end of 8th grade, those Chromebooks will be retired end of life, and we're just going to start that cycle of replacing Chromebooks that way. Yep, Zach.
Just for when we bring this to the NBC, can we have a note in the backup? There are questions always asked about how many Chromebooks we have.
Yep, I figured that out last year, but I will get a number for you.
Yeah, if it's just in the backup, so we have an answer to the question. when it's
You got it. All right, so the next line down is the training stipends.
Special ed.
Oh, 1,200, yeah, thank you.
That's our CI, that's our,
It's CPI.
yeah, it's not CIP.
All right, so these are all our special ed lines. Not everything, it's a couple of the lines, so if we put things in, but that'll be the next
Some of those
round.
get populated by Jess Bickford.
Mhm. Down, educational support, special educational support, that's for our diagnostics and our protocols for supplies, that's SUPP, the supplies. So the 1,200s. We're down to 1410. 1410, this is the co-curricular salaries. And it has gone down a bit. Brian did there's an appendix with what he has done. He has outlined, he bumped up the coaches a little bit. So we're looking at 1,300 and for coaching for the soccer, girls and boys. He also talked a lot about the assistant soccer coach. So in the past, the coach will get $1,300 and the assistant will get $800, but in the end, most assistant coaches do as much work as the regular coach does. So he built in a $1,300 straight down the line for everybody. Yep.
Why is the softball assistant coach the only one at 900 on the appendix at least?
And
the drama?
I see 13.
Drama's
900 is
I
the,
don't know if drama was less demanding than.
Yeah,
Or
softball
shorter.
assistant is 900 and drama assistant is 800.
Just want to have him look at those and see if there's a,
that's interesting, because online it says 1,300 on my sheet.
yeah, his appendix has it at 9, or the appendix he gave us has it at 9.
Okay, we can look at that for
Yeah.
next time. We're almost out of time. So
Okay,
I'm gonna
okay,
push
well,
us
sorry,
through.
okay.
Oh, Mrs. Wiggins.
No, unless I took my ruler off. Co-curricular officials, as you know, the official lines have bumped up significantly over the last couple of years. And then co-curricular supplies, we have, we're always needing, because of replacement of equipment that we have, as well as uniforms. We don't have anything big to replace next year. So the next line, which is supplies is one thing, equipment is another. We don't have any like soccer nets or anything like that that we need to replace. Dues and fees, this covers athletics, music, spelling bee, that type of thing. Co-curricular programs.
That's all appendix A, it's several pages, so you can, when you have time, see all the descriptors.
Then 21-23 is assessment, 1,500 for, we do probably, that's for reading and math dibbles, as well as teaching strategy school, which is the preschool program that they use for assessment. Diagnostic services. Then we'll be down to nurse equipment repair, that's the machine that she had, $75. Her lines have pretty much stayed the same. Last year, there was some concern that one of the machines was getting to end of life, but still kicking in. That price has increased to about $3,300 if we were to need to replace that. Assemblies, nothing about assemblies for a few years. Worked with PTO this year to do something for our middle school as well as our K-4, K-5. Curriculum stipend line, I've increased that a little bit. This covers the summer curriculum work that's done in this building. There's a lot more curriculum work going on, some subcommittee work going on with middle school, covers any work that's done through CRB. Our grant money, our title grant money has decreased, which means that we've had to find a line to pay some of our CRB reps or other things that grant money usually pay for. We started the year 2 mentee program this year that pays our mentees. So all of that together is where that budget line is increasing.
I think I'm gonna pause you.
Go ahead.
Just so we can hear from Mr. Christina, if that's okay.
Of course.
So since you're stuck with us, we'll hear more about the budget after the School Board Association workshop, if that is okay with everybody.
So this evening, we have Bear Christina. He's your Executive Director of the School Board of Education for New Hampshire, and I have handouts for you. He'll present and I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone.
Yes, my wife reminded me this morning.
Yeah, so my wife and Zach's wife have known each other since they were born, from what I understand.
That's what I was told.
Their moms were best friends, I guess, so.
Okay.
That's a New Hampshire story, I guess. Wherever you go, you're gonna find somebody you know after that. So, I want to thank the Deerfield Board for, excuse me, a little cough, for inviting me to Deerfield to do a presentation on school board roles and responsibilities. And I also understand, did we get an email today from Stacy asking about tuition contracts? No, maybe that was a different school board. We have it.
I was gonna say potentially, but I'm not aware of it.
Anyway, well, I came in ready to answer some of those too. Maybe it wasn't a school
I
board
don't think
member.
we knew about that. And it might not have been a school board member. Did you say Stacy?
I think it's at Stacy.
Marcioni by chance?
Marcioni.
Yeah, so she's not a school board member. She's a-
Okay, good to know. I did not realize that, so I brought information ready to talk about that as well too, so. Anyway, that's an aside. You've got the handouts. I only have the white paper. I didn't print myself off a copy of the slides. I'm not gonna go through this, word for word by any means, but gonna give a rundown, excuse me, some of the roles and responsibilities of the school board, compare and contrast that with some of the roles and responsibilities of the superintendent, And then hopefully, if I'm doing my job properly, that middle ground is sort of best practices and things of that nature. So feel free to interject at any time or ask a question at any time. My presentation styles, I tend to be very informal. I don't like using PowerPoint if I don't have to. I'm gonna, we're gonna work from just the handout, and I like to just have a conversation more than anything. Answer your questions, give some advice, some recommendations, whatever it might be, and then go through this and whatever questions the board has on this or anything else. So happy to talk to the board.
I'm happy to give a little bit of background, I think why
Oh,
we
sure.
asked you to come.
Yeah.
So I'm Kendra, I'm the chair.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
3 of us are all new to the board.
Okay.
So the majority of the board who has not been serving for years and years, these 2 are
Or the
old
cranky old
hands.
man in the corner.
So while we are, getting our footing and making sure that we are, doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I think I have attended a lot of your webinars,
Great.
but I think there always are questions, that come up during the webinars that I would love to chat about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the webinars are great, but it doesn't necessarily lend itself to Q&A,
Right.
right? So, and the in-person trainings are the perfect opportunity. So I appreciate that background. So pretty much just a relatively green board, relatively new. Is that the best way to say it?
Yeah.
Great. So when we talk about the roles and responsibilities and pardon the cough rep, there are a handful of statutes and Department of Education regulations that talk about the responsibilities of the school board. And likewise, there are a handful of statutes and Department of Education regulations that talk about the responsibilities of the superintendent. When we developed this document, this version is probably about 7 or 8 years old now, and we tweak it all the time and make some subtle changes here or there. We identified probably, I'm going to say 6 or 7, I'll call them buckets, if you will, for primary roles and responsibilities that state law directs and puts on school boards. And the first one, again, you work from the PowerPoint, the white paper, whatever one you want to do. Most of those are what I'll call somewhat actionable, where the board is directed to do something. But the first one I like to start off with is just a reminder of RSA 189:1-A. RSA 189 is the statute that talks about school board responsibilities. And that says, it shall be, then I'll paraphrase, it shall be the duty of the school board to provide an elementary and secondary education to all pupils who reside in the district until such time as the pupil has acquired a high school diploma. That's why the school board exists. That's your reason of being, to make sure that the kids in Deerfield get an education. And there are obviously different opinions on as to what's best for that and how we go about and how much money we're going to spend and whatnot. But I'd like to look at the Department of Education rules, specifically ED 306.04. ED 306 is what's called the minimum standards for public education. It's about 120 pages long, 6-point font, single space. It's just with pages and pages and pages of regulations. If you look through that, and the minimum standards are basically all the things that every public school in New Hampshire has to do to be an approved school by the Department of Education. And when the school board responsibilities are primarily policy. Department of Education Department of Education Rule 306.04. And it says the school board shall adopt the following policies, and it's got a laundry list, A through Z, on everything you can possibly think of, and probably some things that you wouldn't even think of. Attendance and absenteeism, homework policies, how credit is earned for high schools, graduation requirements, bullying, truancy, and a whole laundry list of things that the school boards have to have a policy on, which is very directed, the school board shall have a policy on, and it was the laundry list. There are also numerous statutes that talk about school boards having to have a policy. The big ones, the restraint and seclusion policy from this past legislative session, bullying policies. You have to have policy for school sports if the kid gets a concussion and return to play and things of that nature. So, and that list gets longer and longer too. When I started with NHSBA about 18 years ago, I think there were about 50 policies that were required by both state and federal law. We're north of 70 now. I think it's 77, somewhere along there. So whether it's the feds or the state of New Hampshire, the state legislature, whenever they want the school boards to do something, adopt a policy. And I have a couple examples in here too that I want to read, just because I'm going to come back to them a little bit later. If you're looking at this document, it's on page 4. And again, this is the Department of Education rule. 303.01A in the middle of the page. School board shall adopt policies necessary and desirable to control and effectuate recruitment, employment, evaluation, and dismissal of teachers and employees. Employment-related policies. The next one, adopt policies relative to the purchase of equipment, supplies, or services. So if we're talking about the purchase of equipment, supplies, or services, what are we talking about? Budget-related policies, right? And a lot of these are sort of internal controls in your business office, but, and then the next one, policy on an anti-discrimination policy, no discrimination on the basis of race, sex, race, age, creed, color, so on and so forth. And then we list some of the statutes that I mentioned as well too. Why is policy so important? Why does NHSBA advocate so strongly that policy is one of the primary functions of school boards? Well, you're establishing the rules of your school district, right? You're establishing behavioral expectations, academic expectations. And the other aspect too is when we think of school board policies, who do we think they impact? Primarily you think of teachers and staff, right? But the reality is they impact your entire community, right? We've got policies on visitors to school. You've got to check in, show an ID, sign in, get a name tag or whatever. We have policies, I presume, that on renting space in this building, right? If some organization wants to rent out the gymnasium, to rent out a classroom. So it's not just academics, it's not just staff and students. It's everybody in the community that's impacted by your local school board policies. And the other reason the policy is so important, when Patty calls me with a legal question, 9 times out of 10, what do you think the first question I ask her is? Do you have a policy or what does your policy say, right? So, anyway, policy. But I'll come back to some of those in a little bit too. We talk about some of the superintendent's responsibilities. The second primary role responsibility, establish the school district's budget and provide budget oversight. Establish the budget may not be one entirely accurate. I understand you've got a municipal budget committee here, so they're the ones that actually develop the budget that goes out to the voters. But the school board, even in towns with an MBC, still has an obligation to put together their proposed budget or their draft budget and work collaboratively with the budget committee. But we also know that budget is not just, it's not like you work on the budget in the fall and send it out to the voters in March and that's it. You've got, as we saw here tonight, you've got budget impacts and budget related topics at every meeting on every agenda, right? Whether or not it's receiving a report from the BA, whether or not it's having to transfer line items. I think somebody mentioned transferring line items because you only had $1, you didn't have a $0 out or one of the line items. You budgeted to plow the driveway 10 times, but it snowed 20 times this year. You get a high cost special ed kid that moves in the middle of the school district, so you've got to finagle and move your money around. So it's transfer appropriations, default by our USB2 here. So you're putting together a default budget, prepare an annual budget in accordance with the Department of Education rule. But again, and once the budget is adopted, you've got internal controls you're getting reports from your VA, expenditures to date, fund balances. If you have surplus money at the end of the year, the board has to decide, are you gonna give it back to offset the tax rate, or you have a warrant article, something that's gonna go into a capital reserve fund or a trust fund or whatever the case may be. So we constantly got budget-related responsibilities. So, moving on, this is a challenging one in SAU 53. Hire and evaluate the superintendent. I know I've done I've done training with Pembroke recently. I did some training for Allenstown within the last year or two, and I remember I was in Chichester maybe a year or two ago. And the evaluation question always comes up because you've got a unique structure here in SAU 53 where I presume that the SAU, all of them signed your contract,
Yes.
right? But you're only responsible for Pembroke and Deerfield, and then I forget the new superintendent's name. Jack is with the other three districts. So, do you have a process for evaluating the superintendent?
So we started, to address the uniqueness of our SAU, we started working with the executive board. So
Is that the chair of each of the five?
not always,
Okay.
it's just the rep,
Okay,
assigned rep.
gotcha.
It's like a committee assignment voted on. So we do goals and we try to do an overarching, both of us, SAU-wide goal.
Yeah.
And then work with our individual districts to have a goal specific to the district. So it's a conversational,
Mhm.
what does Deerfield, a couple of things Deerfield wants me to focus on this year, a
Right.
couple of things Pembroke, and then we just come together and talk about it
Okay.
at exec board, like the exec board rep reports to the full exec board how things are going.
Yeah.
or-
Right.
So it seems to work well.
Okay, because I always say, we get so many questions at the School Boards Association about superintendent evaluation. You have a matrix, you have a rubric, you have a template, and I say, I've got 15 of them. In my experience, I've been looking for the perfect one. If you ever find it, let me know. I don't think it exists, to be honest with you. But and especially because of the unique SAU structure that we have in New Hampshire, where you got one superintendent for multiple school districts. I always tell districts that, we've got some consultants that can help you kind of get the ball rolling. But in my experience, the best evaluation systems are developed locally because every district is going to be different. The evaluation process used in Manchester is not going to work in Deerfield. The needs are different, the goals are different, so long as the board is happy with the process and the superintendent's happy with the process, then by all means, there's no need to change. You tweak it a little bit here and there, and it's maybe never the same year to year, but I don't think it needs to be if it's working for everybody, then stick with it. Related to and this is on page 7. We recommend that the evaluation cycle tends to start with goal setting, joint goal setting between the board and the superintendent. A lot of boards will do that at the end of the school year. Maybe a week or two before July, or maybe that first or second week of July, boards will often have a retreat where they'll do some goal setting and set what they want to see moving forward. If the district has a strategic plan, they'll pull in elements from that and make that part of the goal setting. And then the other thing too that I recommend, the reality is we know a superintendent is evaluated every single day and by the school board every other, twice a month, however your meeting. So that's the reality of it. But we also say, don't wait to do the formal summative assessment or evaluation until May. Like check in, like if you're doing the goal setting in say July, check in on October 1st. Patty, how's it going? Have we benchmarked these? Are we meeting them? What support do you need from us to make this work? Is it a fiscal issue? Is it a resources issue? Is it whatever it might be? You check in again after the new year. You do like a little mini evaluation, if you will. In January, same questions, and then at the end of the school year, you can do your more formal written evaluation that goes in Patty's file. I've also seen some boards, more and more boards are doing this where they'll do the formal evaluation before annual meeting in the anticipation that there may be new board members that come on, right? So if you have, so let's say you have 2 new school board members come on in March of 2024, they're gonna work with you for 6 weeks before they're trying to evaluate you. That's not fair to anybody, not fair to the board members, not fair to the superintendent either. So I've seen more and more boards are starting, their cycle is running, you know, April to the beginning of March, if you will, on the evaluation. So something else to consider. Are there any questions on anything I've covered so far? I feel like I'm saying a lot of words. All right. This one, the next one, conduct hearings and serve as an adjudicative body. Probably not so much in K8, K-8 here. Have you ever had any hearings here, Patty? Oh, yeah, okay. Then I'll cover it then. Usually when I'm more high school, you know, it's often not in the, certainly not like a K-5 district. So the board from time to time has to serve as an adjudicative body, where you're serving as judge and jury, impacting somebody's rights. Primarily, that's going to be either a student or a staff member. If it's a student, we know it's typically either going to be bullying or some level of discipline, whatever malbehavior was exhibited. You might have some other ones, manifest educational hardship hearings. Have you had any of those?
Many, yeah.
Okay. So manifest ed, that's, for those that may not know what that is, that's when a child believes that his or her, or the parent believes that his or her educational placement is having a detrimental effect to the child's learning, where they can petition the school board and ask that they'd be allowed to transfer to another school, and Deerfield will pay the tuition to whatever neighboring school they're receiving admission to. As I mentioned, suspensions, anything over 10 days, the kid is entitled to a hearing. You may have hearing provisions in your discrimination or sexual harassment policy, transportation of bus removal, bullying, I mentioned residency, early admission to first grade. And then on the employee side, it's either going to be a teacher non-renewal. You have a teacher that is not getting satisfactory evaluations. Patty makes a recommendation that teacher not be offered a contract, contract next year. A dismissal, the difference between a dismissal and a non-renewal. A non-renewal is you were not renewing the contract at the end of the year. A dismissal is you're moving to get that teacher out of the classroom like today. You know, they did something heinous, whatever it might be. And your collective bargaining agreement. Most contracts, collective bargaining agreements will have a grievance process. So if it's a building level issue, it starts with the principal, and the superintendent, and then I've seen some grievances come up to the school board as well too. To some degree, this is a lot of where the rubber meets the road in good governance. I should have led with that, but that's all right. You have to be very, very mindful of your role as a school board member when there was an incident at school that may lead to a hearing. The reality is, everybody in town is going to know what happened. At least think they know what happened. It's going to be all over social media. And whatever the incident was at the school, doesn't matter who the 5 school board members are, they're always the last people to know. They're always the last ones in town to know. And right? You know, the last thing you want to do is find out about it on social media. Forget a text message from somebody, but that's the reality of it. So, you know, I presume, you know, you ran for school board because you got kids in the district, or, you know, people know you, you know the teachers, you know the kids, you know the families, whatever it might be. So I'm guessing it's hard for you to go to Hannaford or wherever and without getting parents coming up to you and asking you about this, that, or the other thing. I'm sure it happens all the time. Or at the, you know, the kid's soccer game on a Saturday morning. You're sitting there watching your kid kick the ball around and parents are coming up to you. You know, if something happened, they're going to want answers. What happened? Why this? Why that? Why this? What happened? Is that, you know, why was the police car out in front of the school the other day? I heard this about the other person and about the teacher doing this. You know, it's frustrating as an elected official. I understand that, because your constituents are expecting some level of answers from you and to know what's going on. You have to be mindful, though, that any of these incidences, if they rise to the level where it's going to be a hearing before the board, that individual has a right to a jury, if you will, that's free of bias and free from discrimination. So, you don't be calling the parents and saying, hey, I heard your kid was a witness, can you tell me what they said? If you get the email or the phone call, if it's your best friend, you can't let them get too far down the road with telling you what they know and what they saw and what their kid told them. Because you may spoil yourself. And it's not always fatal. It's not just because you know the families and know the kids involved, that alone isn't like a prejudice or a bias. But you'll get the information that you need at that hearing, right? Sort of like on a need to know basis, if you will. And I understand that's frustrating, from a constituent standpoint. But I haven't seen it, and it hasn't happened too often, but I'm aware of a couple situations across the state in the last maybe 10 or 12 years where a board has interjected itself, or maybe not the full board, but certain board members have interjected themselves into the investigation or talking to witnesses such that they had to be removed from the hearing. And the attorney had to run around town trying to find 5 people that to fill as almost like an alternate school board. And they found a couple former school board members. They found like a lawyer in town, and it was fine, but it was pain. It was really. So just be mindful of when something happens and Patty will fill you in, your board members want to let you know there was an incident at the school today. You don't need to know who. You don't need to know. To some degree, you need to know what. But Patty, I'm sure will be working through it with local counsel, and local counsel will draft up an email, for Patty to send out or whatever the case may be. Moving on, collective bargaining. How many bargaining units do you have here? 2 paras and or support staff. Are you bargaining this year? Are you have 1 of both?
1.
Okay, let's do that. Paras or the?
Paras.
Okay, it's usually a little easier sometimes. Do you have counsel assisting you with that?
Yes, well.
Not
On
the
side.
table per se, but yeah, okay, all right. So collective bargaining, I think everybody knows what good faith bargaining is, meeting at reasonable times and places in an effort to reach an agreement. And one other tidbit too about the collective bargaining agreement, I take it you have a committee that's doing the bargaining, presumably 2 of you, right? Just be aware that the 2 of you, if you reach a tentative agreement, you're obligated to support it in front of the full board and when it goes to the voters as well too. You can't be on the bargaining team and not support. It's an unfair labor practice essentially. And that happened a few years ago. There were 2 board members, they had the tentative agreement, they brought it to the full board for the board to ratify the tentative agreement, put on the warrant and everything. Somebody made a motion and neither of the 2 members of the bargaining team seconded it. You didn't get a second, right? Yeah. And so the Public Employee Labor Relations Board, the state agency that overhears grievances and complaints about collective bargaining agreements, said the 2 members of that bargaining unit of the school board members had an obligation to at least second the motion. Whether or not it went down, that would have been a different story, but you at least had an obligation to second the motion. So
Do you also have to vote for it? Is that
yes, you have
follows
to,
you
yes,
to vote for
you
it?
have to support it. Yeah.
Not just second.
There may be an out, like, let's say you had, say, a 9-member school board. If you had 3 people on the bargaining team, if you voted no at the table while you were bargaining, you could probably, in good faith, vote no again when it comes to the full board. I don't think that case has been tested yet, but the general consensus is that the bargaining team has to support it. Moving on, communicate with the public. Keep the public informed of board actions. Now, when I say, communicate with the public, I mean more than just posting notice of your meeting, and I presume will be live stream, if not live stream, both, yeah, and then archive. And posting the minutes and things of that nature. It's easier now to communicate with people than it ever has been, right? right? How many of these first thing you look at in the morning and the last thing that you look at before you go to bed? And where are younger parents getting their information, right? We're not sending flyers and in an envelope and stuff in the kid's backpack anymore, right? We've got, I presume that you've got, some sort of message alert system, whether it's text messages or phone calls on snow days and whatever it might be. I'm not saying, but the public, the other reason I bring this up too is when we do our new school board member orientation, when we used to do those in person at our office in Concord, we get 100, 120 new school board members. And I'd ask just randomly, I said, okay, how many people in the room tonight ran for school board because you've got kids in the school? And 2/3 of the hands go up, right? Makes sense. And then I'd call on somebody who didn't raise their hand and I'd say, why did you run for school board? And he said, I wanted more information from my school board. I didn't feel as though I knew what was going on. It felt like they met for their 2 hours every other week, and then you never heard anything from the school board except at the meeting. So, there's a couple of different ways that can cut. Okay, well, more information. So you do board does one newsletter a month. Does that mean 2? Like, does that mean more communication? So it's a little bit nebulous, if you will, but, and I'm not saying run out and do this. Some school districts have active social media sites. Others don't. That's usually a resources and a man. What's that?
I do have one.
You do have one?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I
usually,
don't post all that much, but
yeah, I mean,
try to keep people up to date.
yeah, and so, do you have a policy on that?
We do.
And some protocols and,
Yeah.
good job. Usually districts that don't have a social media presence, it's usually just a resource issue that Patty's admin assistant doesn't have time to deal with Facebook, you know what I'm saying? And, but, people like it, and, I recommend, lock up the comments, use it just as a information tool to push information out, meetings, congrats to there's a bake sale, there's a poetry reading, congrats to the basketball team, that kind of stuff. There are other avenues of communication that the members of the public have to communicate with the 5 of you other than posting on social media. So,
I have a question about like a newsletter. So we don't currently do like a board newsletter. I've seen other schools will do like the chair
yeah.
report or whatever. And I just wonder how you sort of balance communicating as an entire board versus
Right.
one person doing a newsletter.
Yeah, so I mean, to some degree, the board would have to delegate that board member to have authority to do that on behalf of the board. But then you get into, does that mean I have carte blanche to write it, or do we need to distribute it, and then emails, and, take that paragraph out, don't take that paragraph, we don't want to get into for a
Not
host
on
of
emails.
reasons,
for
right?
sure.
The other thing too is, when I say a newsletter, I mean, to some degree, that's a little antiquated, right? Because we have social media and digital communication these days. So, if you've been given authority by the board to maintain the Facebook or whatever site you're using, I mean, to some, it's not really a newsletter, but it's serving the same purpose.
Yeah.
You're reporting out on things that are, at last night's meeting, the board, voted for the bond for the addition on the whatever, on Tuesday, the basketball team, on Thursday, the whatever. So to some degree, it's serving that purpose. You don't need to do like a written newsletter per se.
Yeah.
So.
But if you were going to, the board would have to sort of give you that authority.
Yeah, I guess one of the first thing that I didn't, or I missed my lead. It's to some degree, it's a different training, but the board chair does not have, and especially as a matter of law, there's nothing in any of the statutes that talk about like electing officers and like a chair and a vice chair. I always say the chair is the first among equals. And the authority that's given to the board chair is usually done via policy. I know we have a sample policy about authority of the board chair. Call the meeting to order, sign documents on behalf of the board, be a spokesperson with the media, whatever else is in there.
Is that in the G's?
It'll be a B, and the board, the policy section that manages the board itself. Yeah, I forget the call numbers, but we've got it. We've got one authority the board chair. And so that's, those are sort of standing responsibilities that the board chair is given, but then there's also what I'll call limited purpose, where the board can, I move that Sally write the newsletter, seconded, I'll have it out by the first of the month. You know, that's sort of a limited time directive, if you will, or granted authority.
To what extent do boards you work with, or to what extent do you advise or recommend or address how this, I feel like the fact that social media and the pace of social media is just directly at odds with the glacial pace of board action.
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot of dead time to fill up.
In
If you
between
have to be
meetings, right.
posting stuff on social media, nothing's happening for a month.
I know.
So what do you, like, you're posting basketball scores, but that's also what the principal's doing. So why is the board,
Yeah,
you know,
well,
stepping in on what the principal's reporting about the school?
that was a good point. I mean, it's
It's
sort
redundant,
of like
isn't
you're repeating efforts, if you will.
You're
So, pardon me?
You're just echoing that.
Yeah. You know, I mean, have a conversation among the board with that. I mean, you know, the districts that do have active social media presence, I don't know who in the district is doing that. I don't know if it's, you know, I don't know, is it the principal, is it the secretary in the SAU office? I have no idea. So, I mean, yeah, if you're just echoing things, that's not necessarily a good use of anybody's time. I mean, I suppose you could put together a policy with, you know, in your social media policy, you know, the board desires that this sort of content be posted, for lack of a better word, you know.
I mean, job number one is policy, and that's compelling social media content.
Yeah,
That's,
right,
You know, the
right.
latest policies from the school.
Yeah,
right.
Check it out here.
Right, exactly. Post your Title IX policy on there, let the public read that. That's what they're cross-eyed, so. No, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I generally use it for like meeting agendas and, you know, if the board is gonna be making a big decision that we think the public will really care about, we tell them that
Yeah.
that's coming.
Yeah.
I also have used it, I don't know how effective this is, but to like direct people to where things are on the
Yeah.
website, so like,
Well,
if you want the policies, they're here.
you know, as an elected official, to some degree, that's a huge aspect of your job, is when the constituents are reaching out to you. On one level, they want you to fix their problem. I voted for you, I supported your platform if you had a particular issue that you were running on. So now I want you to solve my problem because I voted for you. But the reality is, you know, half of your job, you know, especially when we were talking about like the student discipline stuff, you're getting calls from the constituents and people have a complaint about something, you're directing them to the person that can get them the answer.
Right.
You know, if you've got, if your neighbor has a kid in third grade and has received special education services and they've got a problem with the way the services are being delivered, that's not you to figure out, but you're directing them back to Patty, or directing them back to the principal, directing them back to the special ed director, or whatever the case may be. So,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things I didn't mention in my beginning is that, you know, there are two domains here, right? The school board domain and the administrative domain. The school board's domain is governance, policy and budget, and evaluate the superintendent and the occasional hearing. It's not much beyond that. I mean, you've got your collective bargaining, you've got be responsive to your constituents, but your direct actionable items are policy, budget, evaluate the superintendent, and collective bargaining. And then some of the ancillary ones, the Facebook page communicating with the public and the hearings with the student discipline and whatnot. But the administrative functions, which I'll get to in a minute, are significantly more voluminous than they are, the management, you know, governance is the 30,000-foot view. And as we have on the front page of the handout, job of the school board is not to run the schools, but rather to see that the schools are run well. That's how we summarize it. And you do that through your policies, through your budget, through your evaluation of the superintendent, through talking with Patty on a regular basis. So what's going on with this, what's going on with that. And you get the, hey Patty, just want to let you know, Mrs. Smith sent me an angry email again. She's probably going to be calling you, you know. So, but the administrative function is the day-to-day operations of the school. And that's in statute, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but it's making sure that the teachers are on time, making sure the principals are evaluating the staff, making sure the buses are running, making sure that the boiler is working in the winter, making sure that the sidewalks and the driveway are getting plowed. whatever, whatever else it takes to make sure that the school district runs on a daily basis.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get to it when you talk about administrative functions,
Yeah.
but that's sort of one area that I don't always know how to respond, because as the chair, people will come up to me all the time, like, I heard kids can't wear Halloween costumes, or X, Y, or Z, or I'm not happy about this curriculum thing, and I'm like, go talk to Kristen. Which doesn't feel like super great as like an elected official, but I don't have a better response.
Right. And I think it's, I think it's just maybe a lack of understanding on the part of the parents or the public. You're the principals and the board members and the superintendent are, and respectively, probably even less you, Patty, than the principal in this community anyway, right? And in most communities, where they've got I imagine that the school is probably to some degree like the heart of the town, right? So, so they want help, and the reality is it's people with their kids, you know what I mean? Which it's already, depending on the nature of the issue, they may already be up here anyway. So if it's a special ed, if it's a bullying, if it's a harassment, whatever it might be, they're going to be elevated when they're contacting you to begin with. So, and you just say thanks for your email. Here's the policy. Or, just say this is really an administrative function. Here's the principal, here's the special ed director, here's the superintendent. I'm happy to talk to you about it, but I don't have the authority or ability to solve the issue.
Right. Got it. That's helpful.
The next couple of pages I'm going to skip over. You can read those on your own. The learning curve for new school board members. Just some.
They're familiar with that one.
just some. Well, it doesn't make sense for me just to sit and read the bullet points. It's more, again, just read through it on your own. But the simple answer to some degree to some of your question is that the board sets policy, the administration administers the policy and put it into place. So I'm going to jump to the superintendent's role. It starts at the bottom of page 10, but the bulk of it is on page 11 and 12. Just as we had talked about, there are Department of Education rules that lay out the roles and responsibilities of the school board. There are corresponding Department of Education rules and statutes that talk about the roles and responsibilities of the superintendent. Right? Before I read what's on page 11 of that, do me a favor and jump back and keep a finger on page 4. Okay. Actually, jump to page 4. Keep a finger on page 11. I'm going to read some of the school board policy requirements again. All right. 303.01A. Adopt policies necessary and desirable to control and effectuate the recruitment, employment, evaluation, and dismissal of teachers and other employees, right? So employment-related policies. B, adopt policies necessary and desirable to control and effectuate the purchase of equipment, supplies, or services. We talked about the finance policies, right? Jump back over to page 11. This is Department of Education Rule 302.02, duties of the superintendent. 302.02A, the superintendent shall nominate all certified staff and appoint other employees in accordance with state law, the rules of the state board, and here's the magic language, and local school board policies, right? So, but that's again, talking about employment, right? And the first policy that we talked about in the school board rules is employment-related policies. It's not a coincidence that those two match. We talked about, I'm going to skip over 302.02B real quick, but the second policy that we talked about back on page 4 was about purchase of equipment, supplies, or services, budget-related policies. 302.02D and E, be responsible for developing and recommending to the school board or boards within the SAU the annual budget for support of the educational program, so on and so forth. Magic language underlined, in accordance with local school board policy. And then E, be responsible for developing and maintaining an accounting system in accordance with local school board policy. Again, so we've got We got the first, back on page 4, the state and town school boards have employment-related policies, have fiscal-related policies. And then on page 11, we've got the state telling us superintendent implement the policies that the school board has adopted. Right? It's not a coincidence that there's correlation between those two. It's done on purpose. But without reading the remainder of the superintendent's roles and responsibilities, I'll get back to B in a minute. All of these under the school board, the superintendent responsibility, they all have that language, that magic language, in accordance with local school board policy, in accordance with local school board policy. And that sums it up as simply as can be. The board sets the policy, the superintendent implements the policy. I do want to jump back to 302.02B. The superintendent is responsible to direct and supervise the work of all employees of the district or districts within the SAU, and shall have all powers necessary to make such directive effective as outlined in RSA 194C4. I mean, that's a pretty clear statement that the superintendent is responsible for the employees of the district, right? And you know, one of the ways we often get questions from school boards, you know, especially for new school board members, you get sworn in, and the first thing that happens is you get a list of teachers that are either
Yes.
coming back or not coming back. You're like, what is this? You know why the timing is like that though? It's budget related. You got to know how many staff after your March annual meeting. You got to know how many staff you can support with the budget that the voters passed. So then they give a month for the superintendent to figure out, I got to cut here, I got to cut there because the voters cut the budget by 5%. That's why it's on top of them. And you've got to do the decent thing to give these people an opportunity to get their resume together and look for other jobs, right? So, you know, we get the questions from the new school board members like, I've been on the board a month. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about these people. What do I do? To some level, there has to be a blind faith. You got to trust that the principal is doing the evaluations and Patty's making sure the superintendent's doing the evaluations, and the evaluations are being done with, you know, some level of you know, competence and fidelity. But at the end of the day, where's that going? All powers are necessary. So, you know, you've got to, I know where I was going with this. So if you're recently elected to the school board and you see a name on that list that, like, you know, from either your kid had that teacher or your friends, you know, complaints about that teacher, you know, I think it's prudent or allowable to go into non-public session and say, hey, Patty, I've heard a lot of stuff about that second grade classroom. But here's what I can tell you. If there have been complaints coming from that second grade classroom, so let's say you've been on the board for a number of years, and every year you're getting 3 or 4 phone calls from 3 or 4 parents in the same classroom, right? You call Patty or you call the principal and you say, there's, you know, something's going on, and I've directed them to you. I don't know what it is, but something's going on in that second grade classroom. If you don't hear back from that parent, chances are the issue they've gotten resolved, right? But, you know, and there's also a difference between it being, are you hearing from one parent about the teacher, or are you hearing from 7 parents about the teacher? Because one may just be, you know, the outlier. If it's 7 people complaining about the same teacher, you know there might be a problem in that classroom. Something's going on in that classroom if it's happening over repeated years. And the other thing too about sort of the oversight, making sure that either the principal or the proper administrator is getting back to the parent that's contacting you with the concern or the issue. If the administration doesn't get back to them, they're going to tell you about it. They're going to hear you. Hey, you told me that Patty was going to call me last week. It's been 10 days. I haven't heard from her. You know. So anyway, that's sort of your level of oversight relative to the evaluation, Patty's evaluation process. Questions about that? All right. So those are the school board policy responsibilities about implementing superintendent responsibilities about implementing school board policy. We touched on this bit a little bit the last minute or so. Supervise, nominate, and evaluate staff. Just for the new school board members, I figure you guys have gone through a couple rounds of this. You know, so you get that list, and every district does a little bit different. Some superintendents will give a list with sort of the yes list, like everybody on this list is getting a contract, and if you're not on the list, you're not getting a contract. I've seen some where there's a yes list and a no list. Everybody does it a little bit differently, presuming on whatever your local council is recommending, how you do it. So just be mindful that, no teacher can be employed without first being nominated by the superintendent. That's the triggering effect. The superintendent has to recommend that person for that job. If the superintendent, I've seen this happen, it doesn't happen often, but there were concerns with the board. The board and the superintendent were not having a good relationship at this time. And there was a lot of trust lost. And you usually see this sometimes with a principal. The superintendent nominated somebody for a position and the board wanted to say, no, we want the other guy. And that's not how it works. You have to have that, the superintendent has to give the nomination. The superintendent does nominate, the board can reject that. But if it's somebody that's got tenure rights or a non-probationary teacher, the board better have some good reasons and they better be in writing, other than my neighbor doesn't like him or my other neighbor told me he's a jerk or whatever it is. You need the documentation, you need evidence in front of the hearing, or else the board's decision is going to be overturned. It just is. And we list out the statutes, that talk about the responsibilities of the superintendent with respect to employees. Moving on, we talked about how the board's responsibilities are kind of 30,000-foot view and governance, not management. RSA 194C4 is the statute that lists out in bulk the responsibilities of the superintendent. And we've got that in the italicized language on page 12 and page 13, A through R or whatever it is. And if you look through these, they sound like they're the day-to-day operations of the school district. A, payroll, cash flow, bills, records, files. B, recruitment, supervision, and evaluation of staff. C, review of development, review and evaluation of curriculum. Compliance with laws, regulations, whether Title IX, Americans with Disabilities Act, People Achievement, ongoing assessment, school board operations and the relationship between the school board and the administration. And J sums it up perfectly: the daily administration and provision of educational services to students at the school facility, including but not limited to fiscal affairs, staff, student and parent safety and building issues, and dealing with citizens at large. So, and the other aspect, it's not going to be like directly on point, but if you were to go through your policy manual, that A through R, you probably have a lot of policies that touch on these things. It may not be like point for point and like a square fit, but you probably got policies that address a lot of the stuff that's listed in 194C4. So you're telling the superintendent to some degree, this is how we would like to see it done. And if there isn't a policy, there's probably some level of internal controls and administrative, standard operating procedures, things of that nature that address some of these things. So, and the last page, we borrowed this from our good friends in Idaho. It's just a little cheat sheet chart, if you will, that talks about what the bucket is: policy, board meetings, fiscal, instruction, curriculum, personnel, and then the school board's responsibility under that bucket, and the superintendent's responsibility under that bucket as well too. So that is school board roles and responsibilities in about 45 minutes or so. I'm happy to answer any questions. I can do this in like a half hour. I can do this in like 2 hours. So 45 minutes to an hour is kind of like the sweet spot. What questions does the board have about this or anything else that may be on your mind?
I do have a question. I think we have a policy that says something along the lines of school board members shall support the decisions made by the board.
Yeah, probably not a shall anymore. That may be an older policy.
Okay.
That's more aspirational
Right.
than it is. I mean, you can't. So here's what I say, getting back to some of these social media and whatnot. A board member does not lose their First Amendment rights just because they're on the school board.
Mhm.
If they disagree with the board, they have every right to write a letter to the editor, post stuff on Facebook. The other 4 board members are jerks and idiots and they don't know what they're talking about. This is the worst budget ever, and there's no way I can support this, whatever it might be. The question is, what good does that do?
Right.
That's, you know, and, you know, I ask that, you know, they're gonna be 5-0 votes, they're gonna be 3-2 votes. Sometimes you're gonna win that 3-2 vote, and sometimes you're gonna lose that 3-2 vote, right? Recognize that majority wins. It's as simple as that. And sometimes you're gonna be on the winning side, and sometimes you're not gonna be on the winning side. But the other thing that I tell board members too, even if, you know, great, you got elected to the school board, let me ask each of you, since it's still a relatively green board, presumably some of you came to school board meetings before you got elected to the board and were active in the school and whatnot. Is it significantly different on that side of the table than it is on this side of the table?
Extremely.
Right, and you don't realize it, right?
Mhm.
We're sitting 10 feet from one another, and it's significantly different for the 2 hours that you're sitting in that chair. And everybody's smirking at me, right? Right, so, you know, so everybody's in the same place.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's in the same place. And I say, you know, even, you know, you talked about sort of the glacial movement of school. It is. It takes time to change things, right? You know, I get, you know, you may have gotten on, some people get on, I hate calling it, you know, they run with an agenda, because that can be good or bad, right? Depending on the nature of what they want. Some people want to get on because they want to cut the budget. Some people get on because they want to expand a full day kindergarten or whatever, or they want, you know, an addition to the building. You know, if you have an important issue that is your topic, I really want full day kindergarten. I really want full day kindergarten. If you come in at 100 miles an hour and call everybody who doesn't support full day kindergarten stupid and they don't know what they're doing, or are they ever going to work with you to get your initiative together? Of course not. And even if it's something that they, you know, might otherwise agree with you, you know, you got to work together, you know. So, you know, so the policy, you know, shall support. No, I mean, you can't dictate that somebody, even an elected official, support what the majority is doing. But, you know, I just ask that, you know, it doesn't do any good yelling and screaming about it on Facebook and riling people up. It doesn't do any good. It doesn't get your full day kindergarten. It doesn't get the bond passed for the addition. It doesn't get the whatever it is that you want, the new band uniforms for the high school. So.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you. I was also curious about the email you received. Obviously, it was not sent by the board.
Yeah.
Not sure how you typically would deal with that, or if you get
Yeah,
requests from
when we
constituents.
get emails from members of the public, you know, I usually write back, "You're so-and-so, thank you. To be clear, we are a private nonprofit organization. We are not a state agency." Some people just confuse us. They think that maybe we're like a branch of the Department of Education or something like that. And I get it. Just they Google school board and they try and figure out what you know, we're the first link that pops up on Google. So I just say, you know, I tend to direct them back to either the board chair or the local superintendent. You know, sometimes if it's like a parent calling with, you know, issues with their kid or whatnot, I always try and have you talk to the principal. Yes. Have you talk to the superintendent? Yes. Have you talk to the board chair? Yes. Well, maybe the answer is no. Like whatever it is you're calling me about, like, sorry, sometimes you just don't get your way. But depending on the nature of the issue, I'll direct people to the Department of Education. But I usually try, if I can ask, if they'll tell me where they're calling from, or I can ascertain from, you know, if it says in the email that I'm a resident of such and such, or I usually try and give the superintendent a heads up and say, hey, want to let you know that Mr. Jones calling. Oh, I know Mr. Jones. I'm not surprised, right? So that's usually how that goes. So so it was actually, I think she had called my office. I didn't look I got the email when I was driving here. I think this person had called our office, spoken to Becky Wilson, our director of governmental employees, because Becky was the only one in the office today. And Becky was like, I'm not sure. Let me ask her. She probably didn't even know that it wasn't a board. So she emailed me and our staff attorney. I think that's what it was. So I'll check that if she calls or emails again. That's how I know. So, and usually, I mean, there's people calling with honest intentions. They're looking for answers. You know what I mean? And just so sort of like the same way, part of your job is directing people to the right
Right.
place, the business manager, the special ed director. I try and do the same thing when we get members of the public.
What other questions do people have?
Nothing? You sure? My time is your time.
As far, I mean, I think we are very good about this, but just in terms of like email communications or like, we get questions sometimes about whether we need to read all email correspondence into the record. Okay.
You don't have to do anything with the email correspondence.
Right.
Some boards will, just as a practice, they'll like include them in the minutes.
Yeah,
So
we
they'll-
typically do.
That's fine. But no, there's no obligation, there's no obligation that you do that.
Right.
And there's no obligation that, that if you read aloud at the meeting. I know some boards, have done, they'll report out, you know, the board chair will say, we got, Mr. Smith emailed us about the rusty nails on the playground. Mr. Jones, emailed the superintendent saying that the play was fantastic. So they'll just do that and with a quick synopsis of it. Whatever you want to do. I mean, if you're just attaching them to the minutes, then that seems to be working for you, the community's fine if you don't change their mind.
There is a legal mandate to offer public comments at the meeting,
Correct.
15 each beginning and end or whatever, or we have a policy that specifies that. But
Yeah.
there is a mandate for that, but that does not pertain to email.
Correct. Yeah, so you have to offer at least 30 minutes, you have to offer the opportunity for public comment at least 30 minutes. What we say, and, you know, I don't know how you're doing it here, but, you know, when this law came into place, you know, we were getting questions like, you know, if we have one person that speaks for 3 minutes, we have to sit there twiddling our thumbs for 27 more minutes. I say, no, I say, what you have to do is give an opportunity. Well, we gave an opportunity and nobody showed up. I also tell boards, use a little bit of common sense. Like if nobody shows, like say you open your meeting with a public comment period, right? So 6 o'clock, you call the meeting to order, there's nobody there for public comment. So you start moving through your agenda. At 10 after 6, somebody comes walking in. Finish that agenda item that you're on in this chair. Say, hey, Mr. Smith, I saw you came in late. Did you have any public comment? And just let them have their 3 minutes then, right? It just, you know, you're not gonna, oh, you were here late. Well, you know what, the babysitter fell through and the soccer game ran late and I'm running late to the meeting, but I'm still here. If you're gonna show up, at least give them the decency of having their 3 minutes, so. But yeah, it does not pertain to email, it just pertains to public comment.
So
Yeah.
if we have a 3-minute rule.
Yep.
For public comment and, but we have 30 minutes total, like if there's only one person.
Yep.
Do we have to allow them to speak longer than 3
No.
minutes?
No, they don't get the 30 minutes just because nobody else showed up.
Okay.
So what happens if they're on minute 20 and 3 people walk in,
Mhm.
right?
Sure.
The most important thing with public comment is you cannot restrict somebody's comments based on the viewpoint or the topic, right? You can't, if they're gonna come in, there's ways to craft this in a policy, but you can't do viewpoint discrimination. And the other thing that you really have to be mindful of, you treat each speaker exactly the same. Everybody gets 3 minutes, no exceptions. Because if you give Bob 6 minutes, Larry's gonna want 6 minutes too, and then it's gonna go off the rails. Okay? And they're just eating in everybody else's time. So don't discriminate based on viewpoint and treat everybody the same.
And then in terms of, so we typically have public comment at the beginning and the end.
Yeah, that's the big one.
So if someone does a 3-minute comment in the beginning, can they also do a 3-minute comment at the end?
Do you do 15 and 15 or
Yeah.
do you do,
I don't think we really
I mean,
timed it.
We've never once
Cut it off at 15.
stopped
Yeah.
people and said, okay, well, 5 people spoke, that's the end.
Yeah,
If
no,
it's 30
yeah,
people that want to
yeah.
talk, we-
that's common sense. That's just,
Right.
what I would recommend, thinking real quick. So one of the rules that we recommend for school board discussions is, and I don't, this isn't a hard and fast rule. You seem like a, pretty easy going through, right? Is that typically, but if you get like a larger board, let's say you get a 9-member school board, you know, it's twice as many people talking as a 5-member school board. So I try and say, as board chair, nobody speaks twice on an issue until everybody's had an opportunity to speak at least once on an issue.
Yeah.
And just as a board chair, you go, do you have anything to say? Zach, do you have anything to say? Do you have anything, right? It's just an easy way, so no board member feels excluded from the conversation, and nobody hogs the conversation either. I've been to way too many board meetings where you talk for 2 or 3 minutes, and then you talk, and then you talk for 2 or 3 minutes, and then you talk, and then you talk for 2 or 3 minutes, and then you talk. You get what I'm saying? So somebody is inherently getting half the conversation on a 5-member board. So you don't have to put this in policy, but maybe as a practice, if there's nobody else that's in the audience and that person wants to speak again, you give them their 3 minutes. But if 4 other people or 5 other people are before that person and want to speak, maybe that person waits to the end. Simple rule, nobody speaks twice until everybody's had a chance to speak, at least once.
Do you have any recommendations? Because I've thought about putting like information about public comments like on the agenda.
Yeah.
So like I've seen some board agendas that have like, you have a limit of 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You have to direct your comments to the board chair.
Print the public comment policy on the back of the agenda,
Okay,
presuming the policy is 1 page.
yeah,
Or alternatively, if, you know, just have separate printed copies of it and, you know, put them on the chairs or put them on a table for people to grab when they come in. I've seen some boards have plastered the policy on whatever webpage that has like their agendas and the meeting minutes and whatnot, so it's there. And I would say, you know, if you have I understand that there were some big ticket issues here in Deerfield last year. You know, if you know your.
and this year.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, 2 years.
And all that.
Yeah, 2 years ago, and 3 years ago, and 4 years ago.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Right, yeah, right. But, so anyway, but if you're anticipating 100 parents coming to a meeting, just print out copies of it, you know what I mean, and just have it available. The other thing too, if you've got a big ticket item with the tuition contract, from what I understand, you know, how often does this board meet? Once a month, twice a month? Twice a month. It's an extra meeting. I know that's a challenge, but, you know, don't necessarily put that on the agenda for a regular school board meeting. You got to schedule an extra meeting. Tonight, 2 hours, we're only talking about the tuition contracts.
Right.
You know, I told boards that during COVID, I said, look, instead of dealing with the mask issue, when you've got your policy and your budget and a regular full school board meeting, and you know people are coming and they're angry, just schedule an extra meeting, you know, almost a public forum, if you will. I don't want to call it a hearing, but like a public forum. Say, all right, 2 nights, we're only going to talk about masks. 2 nights, we have 2 hours. Tonight, we're only going to talk about the tuition agreements. And that's just, it's more time and effort, another meeting for the 5 of you, and another meeting for Patty to prepare for if you don't have enough meetings. But it's a way to get through the board's business, you know, without, you know, oh my God, it's 10:30, we still got 6 agenda items that we got to get to.
And then in terms of, I didn't know I had so many questions about public comment.
It's kind of hogging the conversation.
Yeah, sorry. If anyone else has
You're supposed to ask who else
I
wants
move
to.
that she can have the
I give the balance of my time to.
So, you know, our tip, and what I think it says in the policy is that this is not like a question and answer session. So people
Generally, yeah.
come and then they say their comment.
Yeah.
And then we don't have like a back and forth.
Right.
We have,
difficult.
which is difficult.
Well, yeah.
You get
So go ahead with your question, and I'll respond to that.
So we have had a few like public forums.
Yeah.
That is more of a question and
Yeah.
answer, but I struggle a little bit with the idea of, again, one person making representations of the entire board, that the board has not had the opportunity to
So
like.
say that.
Yeah,
Just say that.
Yeah.
The board has not fully has not had an opportunity to fully discuss that, but that's a great topic, and we'll bring it up on the board, and we make a note that, you know. So in terms of the Q&A, excuse me, at a regular school board meeting, you know, again, you've got to do, there's a lot of reasons that why we recommend that. First and foremost is it's a business meeting of the board. The board has to get its business done. If you engage in a Q&A with everybody that comes on up, that public comment period is gonna go from 30 minutes to an hour and a half real quick. The second aspect is, you know, how many questions does each person get to ask then? Like, oh, Bob, you let Bob ask 5 questions, and now it's getting late, and you're only letting me ask 1. Like, that doesn't, like, that just seems like you're getting, I don't know if there's a legal, I don't know if there's, you know, illegality with that, but it's a public perception type, right? And the other thing is, you know, depending on the nature of the question, you may not have the answer, right? You know, if somebody comes up and says, oh, you know, Ms. Sherman, what's the population of the Deerfield Central School? And if you know that, you tell them, you know, but if they say, well, what was the tax rate 2 years ago when we had that bond? Like, yeah, I don't know, I'll look it up, I don't know. You know, so it's that kind of, but you gotta be careful with the dialogue back and forth. For some of the reasons that you said, you might not have the answer. The board hasn't had an opportunity to really fully vet or flush out or discuss the issue. And 2, you run into the problem with, you know, Bob got 5 questions and now it's getting late, so you're cutting me off after 1. Like, it doesn't, you know. And they can always, you know, the First Amendment phrase is other avenues of communication. Call me. My phone number is on the website. My email is on the website. Patty's email is on the website. The phone number of the central office is on the website.
Yes, please.
You just mentioned the fact that these are business meetings of the board. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Right, so by law, the board has to meet once every 2 months. That's in Department of Education law. And if you look at your agenda, you're getting the board's business done. The same way a board of a corporation needs to get business done. You've got to adopt your policy, you've got to ratify your collective bargaining agreement, you've got to work on the budget tonight, you've got to receive reports from the principal. There may be, you know, I don't know, federal paperwork that needs to be signed, or Patty needs the board to vote on something to file some report with the Department of Education or whatnot. So the board's business, what did we just talk about? Policy, budget, collective bargaining. That's what I meant by it's a business meeting of the board. You're getting the official business of the board.
And we can only do that business when we're together in the same room
Correct.
per right to know laws.
Correct.
So the time we're here is our time to get stuff done
Exactly.
and to hear the concerns of the voters, but not for 2 hours.
Correct.
We've also, I think, heard some public comments again, that, you know, we haven't given the public enough information to make a decision. And I want to very kindly say, we have to make the decision.
Right.
We'd love to hear your input, but do you have any recommendations about sort of getting input from people, but also understanding that, like, this is the board who needs to vote on things and make those decisions.
Right.
And it's not, unfortunately, a group project with the town.
With every parent in town, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the 5 of you are the politicians, not me. You know, again, public forums, you know, I don't know if you ever did like some online surveys with the, you know, remember how we talked about one of the first.
A lot of surveys.
I know. You know, I talked about, you know, when we began, one of the things that people said to me is that, why do you run for the school board? I had more information from the board.
Mhm.
You know, the only thing you can do is you can have your meetings, you can have your public forums, you can ask the public for their input. You can, you know, I know, you know, surveys and whatnot, but the thing about the survey at the very least is, depending on if the questions are framed properly, you can like aggregate the data, you know what I mean? As opposed to 200 people standing up and, okay, I want to go here, and he wants to go over here, so we'll check mark in the Concord box, so we'll check mark in the Co-Brown box, you know, and you know, it's not a poll. We're not putting it out to a vote. Yeah, the public weighs in, and you take all the comments from your constituents, you look at the money, and then you guys gotta make a decision. You know,
But the public's opportunity to weigh in March.
right, that's the other thing too. You know, if they don't like the job you're doing, they're gonna let you know, and they'll tell you about it come election time, right?
Yeah.
I think that the hard part is that I think we've been very open with every information we can get.
Yeah.
We've done those surveys, we put the.
Yeah, I remember the
Give it
articles
some-
from the Monitor last year.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot, but we cannot make public our negotiation stuff.
Right.
And that's, everybody's like hammering us for that, and we
Well-
just can't make that.
Well, one, the right to know law specifically allows you to enter non-public session to discuss tuition. NHSBA got that in law 10, 12 years ago, maybe. This was when Hookset was kind of exploring the Hookset model. I don't know if you know what I mean by the
no,
Hookset
sure.
model.
Yeah, we do.
You're all aware of it, right? So, and yeah, by, when Hookset, because Hookset they had a committee, they had a little 2 or 3 members of the board, going around and making communications with Pembroke and Londonderry and Pinkerton, thank you. Like after 2 meetings, somebody realized, was like, if we're doing this in public, we're losing our competitive advantage, right? Because if District A knows that we're willing to go up to $18,000,
Right.
but District over here thinks we're willing to go up to $20,000, we're getting an offer of $17,500, why would we make that public? Saying it's no different than buying a piece of property. It's a contract. It needs to be negotiated to the benefit of both parties. And I get it. I get the public concern and I totally understand that, and I presume that at this point it's just negotiations, right? It's not, and then the voters will have an opportunity to weigh in with whatever the board ultimately comes out with.
And I think that, this is just for us, but I think the biggest sticking point is that there's a lot more to negotiate than just price. Right? There's like
It's
many pages of clauses.
It's not just a tuition rate.
Other boards
There's
only. make one
transportation,
sometimes.
special education, just a variety of different things I probably can't even think of off the top of my head right now, so. Yeah. Anything else about this or any other topic? Going once?
This was great, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, my
Very
pleasure,
helpful.
thank you very much. If you just indulge me for another minute, or two, again, thank you for inviting me to Deerfield. Always happy to come on out to meet our school boards where they are. Honestly, this is my favorite part of the job. I enjoy the training. It's a lot better than dealing with the legislature, I'll tell you. I'll tell you that. But no, this is really, honestly, this is my favorite part of the job. I get to see communities that I know I'd never venture into. And so two, thank you for the invitation. Two, thank you for your continued membership in NHSBA. Without your membership, we're not able to provide the services that we do in terms of the webinars and the trainings and the policies and things of that nature. And three, if there's any follow-up, you think of something on your way home, shoot me an email. I don't know if my email is on any of the materials that I sent out. It might be on the slides one, but it's on our website. Or board chairs call us all the time. If I'm not available, reach out to our staff attorney. Patty, I'm sure I'll see you sometimes.
I actually thought of one more question.
Yeah.
When you said legislative, I said, oh yes, I did have a question on that. So in terms of like legislative issues or advocacy or whatever, like, do you have recommendations for board members about being active in advocacy and how to differentiate yourself? Like if I go to Concord to give testimony or something, what do I say?
Not
You say-
representing
Right.
the board.
You say, thank you very much. And if you want, reach out to Becky Wilson, our Director of Governmental Relations. Give her a buzz, shoot her a call, set up a time to talk to her. She'll talk to you through the board process and whatnot. You just say, my name is Sally Jones. I'm on the Deerfield School Board, but I want to be clear that I'm here as an individual. I'm not representing the views of the Deerfield School Board. My comments and testimony are mine. The same way people putting their disclaimers on Twitter and whatnot that,
Yes.
retweets don't mean endorsement or whatever.
Yes. Right.
No, you just board members do that, not all the time, but it's not uncommon. Somebody will come down and just say, I'm going to give you perspective because I'm on the school board, but I'm here, as an individual. Happens all the time. But if you're thinking of coming down and testifying, have you ever done it before?
I haven't. I watch all of the
You watch
education
a lot of
committee
them.
hearings, but
Talk to,
I have not been.
it's different. I mean, the same way how it's being different out there than it's being on this side of the table.
Yeah.
It can be, I don't want to say daunting, but yeah, if you've never done it before, it can be a little
Sure.
Yeah, so, but if you're thinking of doing it or any specific bills or whatnot,
Yeah.
at least the ones that we're tracking, reach out to Becky at any time. We're always happy, if school board members are coming down, we're always happy to like meet you in the lobby and like show you how to sign in and where to sit and where to register and all that kind of stuff. So,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
I think I'm done now.
You have to yield your time.
Yeah.
Well, if that's it, folks, again, thank you very much. Pleasure meeting all of you. Zach, nice meeting you.
I'll let Ashley know.
Absolutely. And if there's any follow-up, give me a call or email. And as a new chair, like, reach out to us. We deal with this all the time.
Patty's very helpful.
Yeah. Well, you're in good hands. I've had the fortune of, how long have you been at 53 now, Patty?
24.
How long have you been superintendent, though?
13?
13 isn't that long, so anyway, Patty and I have a really good working relationship, and she knows when to reach out, and so, but anyway, thank you again, all.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate you coming out.
Absolutely.
Kendra, I'm gonna unplug the camera and we lost, I think we lost this, but I didn't want to interrupt his, so I can just no, I can restart. Yeah, and I was like, should I pull it? Should I not? So there are some people on that, I don't know if I'll lose them or not, but I'm gonna pull it out and put it back in.
If anyone needs to take a little body break, you are welcome to.
Thank you. No problem.
Anytime.
Better, I'm out of the office. Just an email and I'll reach out to you. Yeah, sure thing. Thank you.
Oh, is that show still on?
I don't know, but that is our custom new mic right there. Is it? Yeah, it is. Yep, the record's frying fast. We think it works. I don't know.
Oops.
This is the test run.
We shall see.
Find out. If it doesn't, I'll run it over the drop.
Yeah, thank you. Is it leaking everywhere?
Then we can play
Oh,
hockey with
thank you,
it.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Been very shocking out for a while, but.
I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
It's actually, so, I don't know if you did, but when I first started, there was a couple new things. When I first started, I think I went to Concord.
I did. I went a few times.
Yeah.
But they used to have the in-person.
Yeah,
They do
they
webinars.
haven't had
Back in the
in-person
day,
stuff
they
at
had
all.
in-person.
Yes, over on, is it Triangle Drive? Triangle Drive.
Oh, I feel that.
It's fun. Next to the abandoned mall. Soon to be Costco and, what was it? Costco?
Where's the Costco?
Gonna go where Steeplegate Mall is.
I think they're gonna
By the
level-
pickleball courts?
I know, I love pickleball courts.
I haven't been yet, but
Whole Foods.
Jeff wants a little friend, pickleball friend.
Plus, I think 700 apartments, it said, or
Whole Foods is supposed to go into or something.
700 apartments, is what I think I read.
Approved or?
It's, the Concord, I don't know if it's a planning board or a zoning board or whatever.